Everybody is familiar with the situation regarding Jimmy Butler. The colorways for Butler's sneakers, those would fit out in the valley, wouldn't they?
We know he wants a trade out of Miami. The Heat have engaged in conversations to move him. This has become an untenable situation. Distraction, chaos, a situation where there's a lack of clarity right now in that Heat organization.
The Jimmy Butler situation just reached a brand new breaking point, and there's a recent trade that the Phoenix Suns made, not the trade that you're thinking of, but in order to prepare them for the upcoming potential blockbuster trade for Jimmy Butler. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to get the latest NBA news to your device. And now that we get all that out of the way, do the intro. You saw us dominate last weekend in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. You've seen us dominate in the NBA recently on a day-to-day basis. You guys have been blowing up my DMs telling me how much money you're making, and now PrizePicks is giving us another free square. And we're going to turn this free square into some guaranteed cash. First, if you haven't signed up for PrizePicks, make sure you go to the link in the description down below. Use my promo code microphone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. And then if you want to make some cash, follow these picks and enter them ASAP before they change the projections on that. Obviously, pick Jaden Daniels to go over 0.5 passing yards because that's guaranteed. I'm pairing that with James Cook getting over 2 receptions because I feel like Josh Allen's going to check down to him a lot that game. Then I'm pairing that with Terry McLaurin getting less than 5 receptions and Devontae Smith getting less than 4 receptions. Now, I'm going to do a 4-man power over here, but obviously if you want to lower your payout but maximize your odds of hitting, then you could do a 2-man or a 3-man. And I give away additional picks on my Instagram story at TheFlightMike and on Snapchat FlightMike Snap. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The Jimmy Butler situation with the Miami Heat has reached a brand new breaking point, and there's a lot of theories as to why this is. Scottie Pippen feels like Jimmy Butler straight up outgrew the Miami Heat's culture.
When you're young, you can work for Pat Riley, but as you get older, like a Jimmy Butler, his system will break you down.
Whereas people feel like Jimmy Butler was slighted after what happened during the playoffs versus the Boston Celtics last year, where he had this interaction with the fan.
If I was playing, Boston would be at home.
And Pat Riley telling him on national TV to shut up.
You know, for him to say that, you know, I thought, if you're not on the court playing against Boston or on the court playing against the New York Knicks, you should keep your mouth shut.
Regardless, given where Jimmy Butler is in this stage of his career, considering the fact that theoretically he could opt out of his contract this offseason and enter free agency, which I don't think he's going to, because if he opts into his player option, he's going to get paid $52 million, and I don't believe that's going to be the case. And personally, in today's market, I can't imagine another team being willing to pay a 36-year-old Jimmy Butler $50 million a year annually. So I'm expecting him to opt into that contract, which means that given the timeline of the Miami Heat, even if they weren't dealing with Jimmy Butler's antics currently, it would be in their best interest to move on from him. And considering that they're the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference, that scenario seems to be getting more and more likely. Now, Shams Charania actually covered this recently.
They're trading away their 2031 first-round pick to get 3 lesser favorable first-round picks, and Jimmy Butler wanted a trade out of Miami. The Suns are atop his list of preferred destinations, and the Suns, if they're going to complete a deal for Jimmy Butler, it's likely going to be something that's going to take 3, 4, 5 team potential trades from what I'm hearing.
And Jimmy Butler has been getting suspended throughout the season for the Miami Heat, but even recently it seems like the Miami Heat decided to suspend him again.
I'm told that Jimmy Butler missed a team flight from Miami to Milwaukee. They have a 2-game road trip against the Milwaukee Bucks, but instead of allowing him to make that flight, Miami is sending him home. This is now 9 games worth of suspensions this month. We know he wants a trade out of Miami. The Heat have engaged in conversations to move him. This has become an untenable situation. Distraction, chaos, a situation where there's a lack of clarity right now in that Heat organization.
Now, the number one contender to potentially trade for Jimmy Butler has always been the Phoenix Suns. But there's been one huge problem surrounding the Phoenix Suns. They have no assets at all whatsoever to swing a Jimmy Butler trade. I mean, what could the Phoenix Suns give up for Jimmy Butler at this point? They already traded 5 first-round picks in addition to Cameron Johnson and Mikal Bridges for Kevin Durant, and they traded the rest of their assets alongside Chris Paul for Bradley Beal, who, by the way, is currently coming off of the bench while averaging a career low points per game. So the Phoenix Suns took a huge step in addressing this. The first being that they traded their remaining tradable pick, their 2031 unprotected first-round pick, to the Utah Jazz for 3 first-round picks. They acquired the least favorable first-round pick in 2025 of the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, or the Jazz, in 2027 of Cleveland, Minnesota, or Utah, and in 2029 of Cleveland, Minnesota, or Utah, trading their 2031 first-round pick to the Jazz. And the reason why the Jazz would do this is so they could spread out their assets a little bit more evenly from the Rudy Gobert trade. They'll have a first-round pick in 2031 where they're banking on the Phoenix Suns to be a shell of their former selves. I have to admit, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of this method of roster construction, of gutting out all of your assets in order to build a big three, but I have to give credit where credit's due. Phoenix is doing everything they can to make it work, and they're getting very creative to try to get as many assets as humanly possible. They also recently made a trade for Nick Richards, which fills a huge position of need for them, and although it's not my favorite way of constructing a team, I do have to give credit for them being as creative as possible to try to make it work. But the craziest part of all is the Phoenix Suns are literally in the same exact position as the Miami Heat, so the fact that Jimmy Butler would even want to get traded here blows my mind. At the time we're recording this video, they have the exact same record as one another. The thing that completely changed everything here is The Athletic dropped a brand new article by Sam Amick, David Aldridge, Tony Jones, John Krasinski, Sam Vini, and Rebecca Tauber, titled that the likelihood of Jimmy Butler's trade to the Suns increases following the Phoenix and Utah deal. It starts out by telling us that the Phoenix Suns appear to be stocking up for a Jimmy Butler trade. In the wake of the Suns' deal with the Utah Jazz on Tuesday night, in which Phoenix tripled its lot of first-round picks, a source close to the Miami Heat star said that there's rising optimism that he's closer to reaching his desired destination, Phoenix, as a result. Yet, as has been reported for months now, that possible deal is widely expected to include Bradley Beal, the Suns guard whose no-trade clause continues to loom large in this situation. Bear in mind, a no-trade clause doesn't mean a player cannot be traded, it just means that the player has to approve the trade to the team. Now, the article continues by saying if Beal were willing, he would likely go to a third team. Yet, according to a source close to Beal, there were no talks between the Suns and Beal as of Tuesday night about the prospect of him waiving his clause. It doesn't add up, for now at least. But the league-wide speculation about what might come next was in full effect because of the Suns' latest efforts. As several rival executives indicated, Milwaukee is a team worth monitoring as the Suns continue to look for third-team partners in a Butler deal. Per league sources, the Bucks' motives would be twofold: cut enough salary from their payroll to get under the second apron, which is the only way the Bucks can legally complete a trade while aggregating contracts, and also add a talented, highly paid player to play next to Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, the NBA's top scoring duo. Whether that would be Beal or perhaps a star like Chicago's Zach LaVine in other potential scenarios remains to be seen. So pretty much there's two ways that this could go down. The first way would be a 3-team trade involving the Phoenix Suns, the Miami Heat, and the Milwaukee Bucks. In this particular instance, Phoenix would receive Jimmy Butler, Milwaukee would receive Bradley Beal, Miami would receive Chris Middleton, and the facilitator would take on the salary. But that's not the only team that Bradley Beal could go to. Evan Siddery also mentions that the Bulls could emerge as a team involved in the Jimmy Butler trade. Bradley Beal to the Bucks is a very realistic option on the table, but so is reuniting with his former college coach Billy Donovan. Zach LaVine would go to Milwaukee, while Chicago nets Beal and draft capital. Chicago's team is relatively young, and they're not that far behind the Miami Heat. They only have 2 less wins than the Miami Heat, although they have 4 more losses than the Miami Heat. They're currently a play-in team, so maybe a trade for Bradley Beal could change their fortunes. Also, I can imagine Bradley Beal being fairly happy playing for his old college coach, considering the fact that he got demoted recently. Now, in addition to adding a new scorer that could play alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, the Milwaukee Bucks would be able to cut enough salary from their payroll to get underneath the second apron, which would give them significantly more flexibility if they wanted to make more trades in the future. But there's just one big problem, and I really don't know how much stock I'm putting into this just based upon how agents have been playing this throughout the entire year, and that's the fact that Bradley Beal's agent actually downplayed all of these trade rumors. And And bear in mind, he's been doing this all season long. If you remember earlier on in this season, even Jimmy Butler's agent came out and called out Shams Charania for creating fake trade rumors. And alas, it seemed like Shams was right at the end of the day. But in this case, Bradley Beal's agent, Mark Bartelstein of Priority Sports, told Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic on Wednesday that any reports suggesting his client would waive his no trade clause to accept trades to the Bucks, Nuggets, Miami Heat, or Los Angeles Lakers were created out of thin air, which I'm a little skeptical of, but let's bring you guys this news first. He added that Beal had worked very hard to earn a contract with a no trade clause, which is of tremendous value. He also noted that the part of the business that every player trades is having no control over his future when it comes to trades. And so the fact that we have control of that aspect of Brad's career is something that is extremely precious and is an asset that we certainly would never want to relinquish. Having said that, I never operate in terms of absolutes, meaning that we would never say that there would never be a trade that you would not consider. You always keep an open mind like everyone does in all aspects of their life. And so if something was to come around that you were truly excited about, you always have to consider those things. Now, personally, do I buy this? Not really, because if you just take a look at every single side, it seems like Jimmy Butler clearly wants to trade to the Suns. I mean, he wore a Phoenix Suns colorway in his game on January 21st. And at the same time, Bradley Beal's value isn't what it was when they traded for him when he was on Washington. Again, he's having a career low 17 points per game, and he's getting paid way too much money just to come off of the bench. But at the same time, moving on from the Phoenix Suns to a team like the Chicago Bulls could potentially put him in a situation where he's the #1 option on a potential playoff contender, depending on how the rest of the regular season goes. His teammates would be younger, and if you ask me, it's a much more natural way to build your roster than what the Phoenix Suns ended up doing. Building a big three is a relic of the past, and it very rarely works out. If you take a look at the top teams in the NBA so far this year, all of them have been built organically. The OKC Thunder swindled the Los Angeles Clippers, got themselves Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and used their draft picks wisely to build a team around him. The Houston Rockets more or less did the same thing in the post-James Harden era. You go to the Eastern Conference, and yeah, the Cavaliers did make that huge trade for Donovan Mitchell, but before that, they swung a huge trade for Jarrett Allen. They drafted Evan Mobley and Darius Garland before they decided to bring in their top scorer. The New York Knicks signed Jalen Brunson and then made very savvy trades for OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. You typically want to build the foundation of your roster before you swing that big trade for that superstar. And in this case, I guess you could make an argument that the Chicago Bulls trading for Bradley Beal would be such a trade. But the thing is, the Chicago Bulls don't even seem to have the foundation fully set up yet. There's no question about it, this team has been in a full-scale rebuild, and they do have some promising players and some assets that they could trade. Players like Nikola Vucevic, they're also interested in trading Kobe White. They drafted Matas Buzelis, who has tremendous potential. They're looking to trade Patrick Williams. They traded for Josh Giddey this past offseason. And if you're trading for Bradley Beal, the strategy of pumping up Beal's value just to flip him won't work here, primarily because Bradley Beal has that no trade clause. So you're gonna have to also make sure he waives that no trade clause in order to ensure that you could get value in return for him. And so far, every trade that Bradley Beal has been involved in has resulted in the team trading him getting a significantly less return than what he's actually really worth, even going all the way back to his time in Washington. So it's a very unique situation. Bradley Beal could end up on the Bucks or on the Chicago Bulls. I don't see how he could end up on the Los Angeles Lakers, even though the Lakers desperately could use some help. So it's a situation that we're gonna have to keep an eye on for sure, because it's clear that the Phoenix Suns are practically in the same situation as they were in last year, and you can make an argument that they're considerably worse. They're currently in the top 10 in offensive rating, but they're the 5th worst team in terms of defensive rating with a 117, which is a huge downgrade from last year where they were 9th in the league in offensive rating, but 13th in the league in defensive rating with a 114.6. So we're going to keep you guys posted on any trades that happen regarding the Phoenix Suns. I personally am anticipating a big trade to happen by the end of this week because the Suns are running out of time. The trade deadline is right around the corner. On top of that, I wanted to take a moment to apologize to people that didn't like the way I covered the Nick Richards trade. I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart, I wasn't trying to be malicious in that particular instance. I rushed out a video. It clearly reflected in the content. Typically, when a role player gets traded for, I like featuring one super superstar on one end of the thumbnail looking at the brand new role player, just so there's someone familiar, but that led to some people thinking that Bradley Beal got traded to some other team. A lot of you guys were upset about it. You let me know in the comment section. I read all of my comments, and I'm going to make improvements in the content. I want you to know I would never deliberately be malicious towards you guys, but I also know that if you feel like you're lied to in the video, you'd click off within 30 seconds, and I would never try to trick you guys into believing a piece of news happened when it really didn't happen. So from the bottom of my heart, I hope you guys could all accept my apology. Here and there I do mess up, but I always try to learn from my mistakes. I like to say it's like the equivalent of an NBA player having a bad night shooting, and sometimes I do a bad job making a video, but I've always taken pride in learning from my mistakes, and I hope you guys aren't too upset at me for it. Aside from that, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Russell Westbrook is making huge improvements in his game. It's probably the most success he's had ever since he's left the OKC Thunder. We have a whole separate video on it, and I'll leave it in the end screen, and I'll meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.